Welcome to Music and Medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Moshe Lewis. I am so ecstatic and I'm delighted to join not only my friend, but a living legend, Freda Payne, singer. She's also actress and even served as a TV show host. I'm going to get into that. You know some of her hits, Band of Gold, and she has been doing performances that really help exemplify the life of one of our legends in jazz, Ella Fitzgerald, now almost, I want to say about 20 years now.
Oh, at least a good 20 years, yeah. It really started even before 2004.
Wow.
Yeah, when Maurice Hines called me and said, Freda, would you like to play Ella Fitzgerald in a play that Lee Summers wrote the script, wrote the book, and we're going to be doing it in New Brunswick, New Jersey at Crossroads Theater.
Sure.
And I'm asking you because you're my first call, and he was familiar with my jazz chops, even though people know me for like a pop R&B record called Band of Gold, and also Bring the Boys Home.
Yeah.
And so they always think, oh, she's a pop R&B singer, but that's the furthest thing from the truth.
Sure.
You know, my first love was jazz, and it's more so today because I started doing the Ella play, and I've been doing it ever since. I do it all the matter of fact, last weekend I was in New York, and I performed Ella at a little club called 54 Below.
Sure.
Yeah, and then I'm getting ready to go to Rochester, Michigan next month, May, and I'll be performing it there at the Meadowbrook Theater in Rochester, Michigan, which is literally Detroit.
Yes, right there.
And which is my hometown as well.
Yes.
So that adds a little bit more of a personal delight for me. And I'll be performing the Ella First Lady of Song, the play.
Sure.
And that's with Norman Grant, that was her manager, her cousin, first cousin Georgiana, her half-sister Frances, and we'll all be performing that in Detroit at the Meadowbrook Theater. We open May 29th, and it goes for 3 weeks, and I'm looking forward to it.
Sure, absolutely. Well, what I wanted to tease out, I'm so glad that you mentioned some more details about it, is some of the parallels with your life and that of Ella, because she too was initially thinking about sort of going into a dance competition, if I'm not mistaken, and she changed over to singing, and then you were listening to jazz and her music probably well before you even knew her. You were just a child yourself.
Oh, yeah. Well, I first became aware of Ella when I was 12, back in Detroit, and on the radio I would hear this lady singing, and I'd say, gee, I like her. I like the purity of her in her voice. I like her pitch. And then when I heard her scat, I said, oh, wow, I really like that. And I just became a fan of Ella Fitzgerald. You know, of course, there were other singers I liked as well. You know, there was Sarah Vaughan.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing.
Sarah she was the violin, the viola, the cello of vocals, you know. And, of course, Ella was more like, you know, mezzo-soprano and all like that, and really a strong, I would say, even pop and jazz, mainly jazz. And then when I heard her scat, you know, the song, the scat that really blew me away was the one that she did. It was called Mac the Knife, Ella Fitzgerald, the Mac the Knife album in Berlin, Germany. And I think the year, I don't know if I have it right, but around 1959 to 60 when she recorded it. It was at a stadium with a quartet. And when she did How High the Moon, Ella made it her signature, but her scat sequence was some of the best scatting I have ever heard. And even though I do it myself, I don't think I could quite capture, you know, let's say the excellence of her scatting, but I try my best. I think I do a decent job.
Sure. What might be an example if you're comfortable doing that? Like, because I don't think most people are even familiar with the term, to be quite frank.
Scat? See it up, boy, do they? Better than up, boy, do that, do they? Said I be the boy, do squeak, weep, better, that's scatting.
Right. Sure. So obviously, sort of imitating some of the instruments in the band and things. What are just some of those elements, though, that you think sort of led to scat, and what is it? What's the sort of the meaning behind it, even at a deeper level?
Well, from what I've read about Ella in a book, because I read it, there was a book written about Ella. I forget the author, but I read it a long time ago, and he was saying how she started. I think she started scatting, it was like bebop at first, and she was working with Dizzy Gillespie, and I don't think she scatted that much. You know, she started out at with Chick Webb in the mid-30s, when she was a teenager. And she, at the Savoy Ballroom in New York and Harlem, on 141st Street and Lenox Avenue. And she was singing more straight, but then she did do some scatting. Yes, she did do some scatting. I think she just picked it up. You know, it's sort of like, it would, because she has such a musical ear. She had such a musical ear that she was able to, like, when it came to a break, she just started, and she just starts doing it, you know. And as most people who do scat, like a Kurt Elling or somebody like that who's a terrific scatter, you know. I recorded an album where I did duets and with Johnny Mathis, Kenny Lattimore, Dee Dee Bridgewater, who also is a terrific scatter, and of course Kurt Elling, who is he's really a great scatter as well. And it's sort of almost like a challenge, you know. It's a, you know, you become another instrument. The singer becomes an instrument, and you're hearing notes that just come to you in your head. Somebody described scatting once as speaking in tongue. In other words, it's not by rote. Like somebody could listen to Kurt Elling or Ella and
Freda.
Or me, and just keep listen, and they can repeat it or they can learn it by rote. You know, like a mechanical thing, like an actor. But you know, real true scatting comes with your intuition, your ear, and sometimes it's like almost like you blend it with the chords you're hearing. You blend it with staying in key. You know, you can't go off the key. You know, you can do some, let it go, wee-ow, you know, stuff like that. But you have to kind of like stay within your realm, but at the same time, kind of you skirt around it. You play. I call it. You know, the word jazz. The word jazz emanated from the whorehouses in New Orleans. You know, the brothels, and they would say, "Oh, where'd that name come from?" You know, remember Jelly Roll Morton?
Yes, sure.
Because I did the play. By the way, I did the play, Broadway play, Jelly's Last Jam.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, I did that. I was on tour with it for a year with Savion Glover, and Maurice Hines. And they were saying Jelly Roll Morton was supposedly the inventor of jazz, and it came from him playing the piano in the brothels. And he would play the piano. And the term was, they're just upstairs jazzing around. So jazz was a reference to sex.
Okay, gotcha.
You know, and then again, it emanated another way. You can say it came out of blues as well. But to me, blues is like more earthy. Just straight out blues is more earthy, and you know, it's not as intricate as real jazz. So you have like a Miles Davis who had, oh my God, anytime I'm in my car and I'm listening to Sirius XM real jazz, I can always tell when they play a Miles Davis song. I just look down at you know, you see the you know who the artist is, and I said, oh wow, Miles Davis.
Sure, right. Signature. No, absolutely. So talk to us about sort of those formative years, going back a little bit to Detroit, and just how not only the city helped support you, but also shape your career, but sort of how early on, at least, jazz was definitely one of those things that you were leaning a little bit more towards.
Well, I didn't even know I could sing, that I had talent until I was 12. And then by the time I turned 13, I started winning contests in and around Detroit, and then I won a couple of contests on TV, and that up to my ego, like, oh wow, I must be okay. People like me, because I actually won a talent contest on TV twice, and then I went, and then they flew me to New York to do the Ted Mack Amateur Hour, and I was 16.
Right, at the time.
And I did that, and I didn't win first place. I came in second. And I sang a song called From This Moment On. And it's basic, no scatting, just a plain, straight out standard. From this moment on, you for me, dear, only two for tea, dear. From this moment on. And I just belted it out, but music, and it started at 12 into 13, I would say 13, 16, I began to really blossom. And then after I did the Ted Mack Amateur Hour, and I came in second, I got a big write-up in Jet Magazine, and I was shocked.
That they even knew who you were.
I said, how did they even know who I am? And back then, Jet Magazine was the magazine. Anybody of color, African American, if you were doing something out in the public eye, they would write about it. And that's where you would find out who was who and who was doing something. And matter of fact, my first Jet cover was when I think I was 18 or 19, and it said, I was a protege of Quincy Jones.
So speaking of such prominent men, going back even to somebody, as you mentioned, Detroit, like Mr. Cordy, it seems like, because it's really popular in the press right now, that there was this challenge of signing young artists and really also sort of managing them appropriately. So you, luckily with your mom's help, turned down, it sounds like, some offers that maybe really weren't to your best advantage.
Well, here's what happened. See, there's a lot of elements here that people don't quite get. They think, oh, well, why don't you regret it, And I was 14. There was no Motown at the time. We're talking about 1957. Matter of fact, this was just predated Tamala. That came first, Tamala, then Motown. And Barry was basically an ambitious guy that was out, and he was looking for talent, and he saw me, he heard about me because I'd won these talent contests, and he would come to my dance class. I used to study ballet and also Afro-Cuban. He would come to the Afro-Cuban class and watch me dance. And then he wanted to, he wrote songs for me. He wrote 4 songs for me. We went and recorded them at a studio. It was a recording studio in Detroit at that time called United Sound. And ironically, Hitsville, where it's located, is on the same street in the same block. But United Sound is no longer in existence, but Hitsville is right there. And he there was no Hitsville at the time. And he wrote songs for me, especially tailor-made, and we recorded them at United Sound. And then he wanted to manage me. So he and my mother would sit in our living room, and I would sit in the staircase next to the living room saying, oh, I wonder what's going to happen. I wonder whatever Mama says, I have to go along with that, because I trusted my mother, and I considered my mother very smart. Maybe sometimes maybe she wasn't that smart, but
Right. Well,
I'll put it this way: if anybody had a looking glass or a psychic and say, you better go with this man because he's going to be something, he's going to he's going to change the world, for music. If I'd known that, maybe But you'd never know. You got to follow. They say you got to follow your road.
Yes.
You have to follow your road, and where God leads you. It just wasn't meant to be. And so, because they would talk about terms like what his commission would be, and my mother disagreed. He wanted too much,
right.
And then again, I won't go into that. But he wanted more than what she felt was necessary, was proper. And she would say, well, Barry, who would be paying for my daughter's transportation if she has to take a flight somewhere? Right. He said, your daughter. He said, who would pay for her gowns? Your daughter. Who would pay for the hotel bill? Your daughter. Right. Well, then what does that leave Freda?
Exactly. Nothing. You're still her.
Still
the daughter,
and that's what, it was either my way or the highway. Absolutely. With Barry.
Sure, right.
And he has that persona.
Sure. And
everybody that goes back, even back in the day, it was like his way or the highway. And a lot of these people like Holland Dozier, Eddie and Brian Holland, right. Martha Reeves, all these different people who got on board in the beginning, right. The mirror. It was like they just had to condescend to Barry, sure. And right. because first of all, they had nothing else going.
Right.
And he was the guy in town sure. that was doing things,
right. Making things happen.
and they saw that he was like this force.
Right.
He was a force, and
going places.
And he was ambitious, and they felt like, well, let me get on this train with this guy because sure. I ain't got nothing else right. going.
Right. No other trains. Right.
So that's how it happened.
Right. And this wasn't the first time though, because I think also similarly, Duke Ellington worked with you, wanted to also manage you.
Who?
Duke Ellington.
Oh, Duke Ellington wanted me to sign a 10-year contract right. to be with his band. I was 17.
Right. So
I was 17, and he liked me, and he presented a contract. I don't know where that contract is today. It would be worth money. Sure. I don't know where it is. Who knows? But it was 10 years, and my mother read it, and we had a neighbor named Alan Early Jr. He was a criminal attorney,
right.
and he was best friends with my parents.
Right.
He read it, and
Carefully.
He had questions.
Yeah.
He said, 10 years, that takes you beyond your 21st birthday. He broke it all down.
Sure.
He said it should be renegotiated then. And he said, and also what the salary was not. My mother said, well, when my daughter, after maybe 4 or 5 years of being with your band, shouldn't the salary escalate? And let's say she becomes a name, sure. Shouldn't the salary be escalated to a certain height?
Right.
Like a couple of more $3,000 or $4,000. He said no.
Right.
It was almost like Barry.
Non-negotiable. Right. There's a theme here.
No,
sure.
She would still make $300 a week or $400 a week, maybe. And it was like, but what if my daughter you've made my daughter famous and known, and she can ask for $4,000 or $5,000 a week at a club,
right?
Because of being with you. Would you adjust her salary? He said no.
Right.
End of story.
Sure. Now, luckily, you did work with Pearl Bailey.
I worked with Pearl Bailey. Yeah, we toured.
Sure.
She had a review. It's called the Pearl Bailey Review. Mm-hmm. And, that was an interesting experience. Yes. Miss Bailey, first of all, she told you what color makeup to wear.
Yes.
And that was darker than my complexion. Mm-hmm. I think it was kind of like Pancreol 28, Max Factor. I think it was at Max Factor, yeah, because it was pancake makeup. Right. And she said the reason is because she wants all our complexions to blend. Right. Okay?
Sure.
True story.
I believe it.
And also, she made a demand, a rule. She says, if you have any cologne or perfume that you wear, it has to be replique or nothing at all. She says, because I don't want a conglomeration of all these different scents backstage. Mm-hmm. Can you believe that?
Yes, I can. Because I've heard she was very strict and very intense.
Very strict. Matter of fact, I don't know why anybody has done a biopic on her. I don't know why, because she was huge.
Yes.
She was huge back then. She was like the headliner in Vegas,
Right.
you know, and headlining in theaters across the country. She was in movies. You know, she did movies. She was in the Porgy and Bess movie. There were other movies she was in.
Right. Boxing Hound, she did the sound for that.
Yeah. And then, of course, she did Broadway, Hello, Dolly.
Right.
And I think the perfect person to play her would be Queen Latifah.
Yes.
Queen Latifah looks like her a little, you know.
Yes.
And also Queen Latifah, because Pearl had this almost like kind of like a macho thing about her. You know, she was married to Louis Belson, an Italian guy. He was sweet. He was a nice guy too, guy. And I just wish one day, if it's not Queen Latifah, she's my first choice.
Yeah.
It should be somebody comparable in terms of casting.
Yes.
You know, who looks like her and of course has the persona of a Pearl Bailey was a strong woman,
to say the least.
Yeah,
and I wanted to tease that out because do you sense that there was also something maybe a little different then versus now, that many of the artists, especially female artists, having to sort of deal with this male-dominated field, really had to kind of, you know, have their strength, to put it politely, to really not be taken advantage of, literally and figuratively?
Well, men, it would be easier for a man. Yeah, women, especially me coming up, you know, because I'm young, and I have to say, you know, I have all the other stuff going for me.
Right. Yeah.
I was always, you know, I had to really, you know, kind of like be on guard or whatever.
Sure.
And sometimes I let my guard down, but
Right.
but other than that, you know, I'll put it this way: I made it through the rain.
Sure. Yes.
Barry Manilow.
Right. Exactly, to say the least. And I want to bring up another important player who you had mentioned, Quincy Jones. Talk to us about sort of that chance meeting of him again, I think, through your attorney.
I met him at a restaurant in Manhattan at the time in the 40s, and it was called Sapphires, and it was owned by a African-American man by the name of Danny Sims. And Dan,
I can't believe you remember that.
Huh?
I can't believe you remember the owner, because I'm from New
oh
York.
yeah,
and I don't
oh
think
this
it's
is
still
part of
there
my.
anymore.
Well, if you get my book,
Sure,
you should
yes,
have my book.
Of course, but I mean, but still to remember it even to this point, it's just the
Oh,
owner
well,
of the restaurant that you met, Quincy.
Well, yeah, well, okay, it was at the restaurant, and I was with my roommate Carol.
Yes.
And we just happened to go there because we figured, well, let's just go out. Because back then, I was 18.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like 1960 or 61.
Right.
And so we would go, there was wasn't hardly anything on TV. There were only 3 channels. So at night, we would eat, she was a nurse.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd say, let's go out, you know, let's go out. We go to the clubs, you know, we go uptown to Small's Paradise,
Yes.
you know, or Count Basie's, you know, just hanging out. And so we decided, let's go down to Sapphires, you know, and have dinner.
Right.
So we went down there, and Danny knew me, and he knew that I was a singer too, you know, trying to make it. And he walked over to me, he said, the guy over there, his name is Quincy Jones, and he's performing, he has a big band, and he's performing at Basin Street East on the east side. And I think you should meet him because he's going places. You know, he's a new guy in town, and he's going places.
Right.
And I said, so he brought me over there to Quincy's table and introduced me, and Quincy invited me to sit down. And he was with a guy, his friend who was a sax player, with him named, I think, Jerome Robinson. I think that was his name, Jerome Robinson. If I get it wrong, forgive me.
Yeah.
Anyway, I met him, and we started talking. And then he said, "What are you doing? You know, when you leave here, are you going any?" I said, "No, I'm with my roommate. We're just hanging out." He says, "Well, why don't you come to my show tomorrow night?" So he invited me to Basin Street East for the next night, and I went. And, after that, after he was finished with his sets, he said, let's go to this restaurant. It was called the Brasserie. The Brasserie, it was on the east side in the 60s. And we went to the Brasserie, and it was a lot of people went there after the theater, before the theater and after the theater. And I mean, back then, that's when women wore their mink stole, their sables, their chinchillas, and their diamond rings. That's how it was back then in those days. You wore real jewelry and sometimes fake. Right. And I remember he ordered steak tartare. Wow. And he said, I don't know if you're going to like this, but it's ground raw beef, and it's mixed with shallots, and like egg, capers, a little mustard, a little this and that, Worcestershire sauce, blah, blah, blah. And I loved it. I loved it. And because I have a palate for gourmet food. I don't know why, but, some people do, some people don't. Yeah. And so that was it. And then, of course, we wound up having, a relationship. Sure. And like you mentioned about vulnerability and being young and out there. That's but then again, I fell in love with him. Sure. Yeah. What are some of the insights that you feel you developed, just even from a professional perspective, during that time, watching him grow and have the band and things of that nature? Perspective? Yeah, meaning just that, like maybe in performing or seeing him work, you started to sort of see the development into the Quincy Jones that we came to know. But see, also, he invited me to perform with him with the big band at the Apollo Theater. Yeah. And I was booked, he booked me to perform with him at the Apollo Theater. And the headliner, the singer, was Billy Eckstine. Right. Billy Eckstine was like the guy back then. He was like superstar. He was. So he was the headliner, and then the comedian was like Red Fox, and I was the girl singer. Right. And it was at the Apollo. And then I worked with him then. It was like a whole week. And then after that, we flew to Chicago to perform at the Regal Theater for a whole week. And then a year later, he did it again. And he called me to perform with him, to come and join him again. And I did. And this time the comedian was Nipsey Russell. Yes. Yeah. Oh, and also he had a dance act, Coles and Atkins. Honey Coles and Charlie Atkins. Right. Wow. Yeah. And they were a dance team, sort of like the Nicholas brothers. Harold and Fayard Nicholas. And yeah. How does one, in your perspective, sort of maintain relationships and some balance with having to literally zip and zap all over the globe for performances and shows and rehearsals and things of that nature? Oh, well, you know what? It was what I had to do. It was what I signed up to do. It's what I was pursuing my career and what I loved to do. And that's how I made money. Right. Maybe back then it wasn't a lot of money, but it was, that's how I survived. Sure. And that's because I never went to college. Right. I graduated from high school, and I should have gone to Juilliard. If I could go back, they say if I could go back, I would have done this, or I would have done that. I kind of wish I would have gone to Juilliard because I did have an opportunity, and that was because Duke Ellington's son, Mercer Ellington, he's the one that heard me sing in the first place, and said, "I want my dad to hear you." Yes. Mercer Ellington, I think, was on the board at Juilliard, and he said, "I can get you in," and I think I got scared, because I felt like Juilliard. Oh my God! Sure. I'd have to go to New York. Right. Where am I going to stay? Right, overthinking it. Sure. So it was like one of those things where I wish if I could go back, I wish I could have gone to Juilliard. Sure. But so here's a follow-up to that. What
advice, you've probably heard this before, would you give to some young people? Because now it's more intense, more competitive, and people do have to fly and go everywhere to try to keep up with their career, get it going.
Oh, it's harder.
Exactly.
It's like now, it's like you have talent contests on steroids. You know, I mean, steroids, baby. You know, American Idol, The Voice. Right. What's another one? American Idol is number one. The Voice is another one.
Sure, they have The Masked Singer.
You know, The Masked
America's
Singer.
Got Talent. I mean,
I don't even consider that one. Sure. That was, but nowadays you almost got to kind of like get on a talent contest, televised nationally, or put a video out on YouTube. That's what they're doing now. You know, that's what people. I think Justin Bieber. That's how he got discovered.
Sure. Right.
You know.
Yeah.
And you can get on YouTube, Instagram, and somebody, you know, with, you know, that has connections and is looking for talent, will see it and say, "Oh, I'm going to contact that person, and I'm going to like, you know, put them into this, or see if they're interested in doing this or this TV show or this movie or whatever."
Sure. Well, speaking of Justin, I mean, it's another example. Somebody young who kind of feels that maybe early on they were on a faster train than they'd planned, considering their age. So it sounds like some of the elements that you had at least going for you, mother, very protective. Also, you were close. You were willing to listen to her. And then also a family attorney, in this case, a criminal attorney, to really sort of look at everything and really try to help be careful about what you're signing, who you're spending time with, how many hours you're spending in somebody's house.
And you know, it's a funny thing, because my mother once said to me, after the Berry thing had passed, and after the Duke Ellington thing had passed, she always said, "Sometimes I wonder if I'd let you go with Berry, you know, if I hadn't been so strict." Because my mother was very smart, but then again, maybe she didn't have the foresight, you know. But then again, you never know what she was thinking, because she knew. First of all, she knew the Gordy family.
Sure.
They all grew up in the same neighborhood. They all came from the ghetto.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
And we all went to the same church.
Right.
You know, in Detroit, Bethel AME, on the corner of Frederick and San Antoine. And it no longer exists, by the way. But that's how it was back then. Everybody basically knew everybody, or somebody that knew somebody that knew somebody that knew somebody. You know, when you're in Detroit, you know, your reputation gets around.
Right. But it definitely seems the family attorney helped to protect you, and you
he
looked
did.
at those contracts
And
carefully.
that's why when it came to signing with Holland, Dozier and Holland, my mother didn't. She says, "I'm not going to interfere with this one." You know, because I feel guilty about Berry, and I feel guilty about Duke, and but the thing is that she could have, because they were expecting it. Because Eddie Holland told me later on, he said, "You know what? I was expecting you to, you know, to negotiate and to fight this thing and tooth and nail." And he says, "But I was prepared to deal with it because I really wanted you." He says, "I wanted you because I knew that Berry had wanted you, and he wanted you bad." Quote, those were his exact words.
How did that relationship help flourish and make your career move?
Well, that's how I got to record a song called Band of Gold, which became a gold record. And you know, Band of Gold was considered one of the biggest singles to come out of Invictus Records.
Yes, absolutely, sure.
Yeah.
And then
a year later, Bring the Boys Home, and that was a goal. Hey, there it is.
Exactly.
There they are, right there.
I've got the proof to show for it. On that note, I wanted to talk about traveling overseas and the ability to perform there, sort of how that opened your world even further, because that's some of how the word and popularity came back, it sounds.
Well, traveling overseas is part of the business, part of your career. I actually had worked in Europe before I even had a hit record.
Right.
In 1965, there was a promoter. He was from Australia. His name was Jeffrey Patterson. This was in 65, and he somehow, I guess he heard about me or by that time I had recorded an album. I recorded my first album in 1963, and it was a jazz album on Impulse.
Right.
Impulse was like the equivalent of Blue Note or Verve.
Right.
and it was jazz, and one side was big band, the other side was with a trio. And I guess he had heard about me, and he reached out to me and said, I would like to book you on a tour in Europe. He said, would you like to do that? He says, I'll have you flown over to Frankfurt, Germany.
Right.
And he booked me, and I worked what they call officers' clubs, private officers' clubs. Mm-hmm. And then we went to Paris, and I performed in Paris. And then England, back to England.
Right.
And I performed, and then also I did a show, I performed in Scandinavia, Norway, right. Oslo, Norway, mm-hmm. and I worked a theater there called the Chat Noir, wow. Meaning that's French for black cat. And I was the only American in the cast. Everybody, they were either Italian or German or French. And I was I guess, the only American. Was it 1970 or 71? I worked in Paris at the Olympia. Right. I opened for Jerry Lewis. Right. And matter of fact, that was a wonderful experience because I just had Band of Gold. Yeah. And it was when everything was really fresh and new, and it was hot, and it was happening, right, and it was a big hit over there. And that was a wonderful experience.
Sure. Talk to us about sort of your memories, since you've been on the show so many times, just your sense of Johnny Carson. What did you enjoy about his personality, his interviews?
He was a delight. He was just a nice person. First of all, Johnny Carson back then, when he was on, he was a combination of Jimmy Kimmel, Stephen Colbert, and Jimmy Fallon all wrapped up in one, because there was no competition. Right. It was only one late night. It comes on at 11:30 show, and that was Johnny Carson. There was no competition. Sure. Now you got three. Sure. You got Channel 2, Stephen Colbert. You got Channel 4, Jimmy Fallon, right. And Channel 7, Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel right. On Channel 7. And I did the Jimmy Kimmel show about a year ago with Jeff Goldblum.
Yes. And talk to us about how that came to pass. Yes.
Well, I was actually, I get a call from a guy, his manager, and this was in 2022. Yeah, it was in 2022, and I was actually doing my Ella play right. in New York the Meadowbrook, no, not the Meadowbrook, the Malloy Theater okay. in Long Island, New York. Yes. And I get a call and a text from his manager, and he was saying, would you be interested? I manage the actor Jeff Goldblum, and he's got a band, Mildred Snitzer band, and he's working on his new album. He's recording with the band, and he wanted me to reach out to you because he wants to know if you'd like to do a song on the album, and the song would be Lazy Afternoon. Yes. And I texted back, oh yes, sure, of course, because I like that song. Yes. I like that song too, and never done it before, but I love the song Lazy Afternoon. Yes. And so what happened? I actually recorded it at the theater. They had a sound room, and we used an engineer that worked, at that theater, and they sent me the track, and I actually recorded it in the sound room right. at the theater, right. and it's on his album. Right.
And then you got to.
And then we did, and then he said, "Oh, we're going to be he's booked to do Jimmy Kimmel, right. and would you like to do it with us?" I said, "Oh yeah, I'd love to do it."
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. How you stay so young and so beautiful at this point in life? Any secrets that you can give us?
Secrets. There are really no real. I take good care of my skin. Mm-hmm. I keep it moisturized. I use and it's not, you don't have to use expensive products. I use just basic, good products that I get at Sephora. Mm-hmm. And Oh, and I work out at the gym. I go to the gym, and I work out like about twice a week, maybe 3 times, but twice is enough. And I work out with a trainer.
Sure.
And then prior to that, I started in the 70s doing yoga, Hatha yoga, in 1973, and I did yoga for exactly like from that point to almost I've done yoga for over 40 years. And then when I started having trouble with my knees, you know, the arthritis set in to my knees and my shoulders, and I had to have knee replacement and shoulder replacement. Then my body said, girl, you can't be doing some of those postures anymore. You got to cut back. You know, you can do some stuff, but you can't do everything. And because I used to be really good at yoga, you know, and I was studying with Bikram Chowdhury. As a matter of fact, I'm in his books. I'm in his first 2 books on yoga. Doing the camel pose.
Yes. So since because you originally were dancing.
Yeah, I used to dance. I never really danced professionally per se, but I studied dancing. I was always taking ballet, modern dance, modern jazz, you know, and then of course that led into like going to the gym and stuff like that. I've always stayed active.
Clearly.
You know.
So that's what I wanted to highlight on, because I'm a physician and I'm constantly trying to talk to patients who are older about the benefits of going to the gym, but you can be a better PSA, public service announcement, than I can. What would be those benefits for a person who just might happen to be over the age of 70 of still going to the gym?
Well, you know what? It's good for your bones because what do you call it? Perosis.
That's correct.
Yeah. Sets in as you get older, your bones get thinner and more brittle. Right. Well, when you actually do weights and exercise, you know, all kinds of, it helps to keep the bone density. Matter of fact, I can't show my muscles too much, but I don't know, you can't see my muscles.
The show's called Music and Medicine, and when you hear those words, music and medicine, how does it resonate to you? How does it sound
Music and medicine. Music is healing. Music, not all music is healing, but I can listen to certain music. I'll put a CD on or hear something on the radio, and it'll just send me into a whole nother state. Like when I listen to Miles Davis, Sketches of Spain, it takes me to Spain.
Right.
The first time I went to Spain was in 1965, and I was on the plane, I was sitting by the window, and I looked down, and it looked almost like Vegas. It was like, not Vegas, but the desert.
Right.
It was the desert. And we were flying into Madrid, and all of a sudden I start hearing da-da-da, 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 da-da-da. It just went into my head, because it was one of my favorite records. And another one that I like, that I used to get, and I have to say, we're friends, we're good friends today. Thelma Houston, Sun Shower. It actually was recorded in 1968, and that's when I first heard it. And Jimmy Webb was the writer, and and he did the music and everything. And Jimmy Webb, to me, is a genius. He's a genius. I think he wrote songs like Didn't We, songs like that. MacArthurs Park, he wrote that. Wow. I remember once I asked him, I said, first time I met him, I said, you know, Jimmy Webb, when you wrote MacArthur's Park, were you on acid? MacArthur's Park is melting in the dark, all the sweet green icing flowing down. Someone left the cake out in it. How can you come up with a mind like that and write something like that? MacArthur's Park is downtown somewhere on the east side, and it's like MacArthur's Park is melting in the dark, all the sweet green icing melting down. You gotta be on acid.
What'd he say?
You know what he said? Now, I don't know if he was saying this just to like throw me off. Sure. He said, no, not at all. I said, well, I guess he's a genius. But it was a great, Richard Harris was the first time I ever heard the song. And then I started doing the song myself back in the 60s. I remember I started doing it in my show back in the 60s.
Some young teen today may find herself in New York or Detroit, and she's maybe 17 and trying to find her way in this complex music industry. And are there some words of advice or recommendations that you give to her, because things haven't changed all that much. Contracts can still be complicated, and it's still very hard to make it, and it's still more male-dominated. Any advice that you have as she finds her way into this music career? 17.
Oh, my God. You know what? It's a matter of hooking up with the right people, the right person. You know, like they say, remember the old saying from the Bible, many are called, but few are chosen. And it's a matter of hooking up with the right people, the right person who takes an interest in you, who cares about you, and who loves you. You know, it really believes in you. And, you know, that's what it is. It's like when I signed with Invictus, they believed in me. You know, they believed in me. They felt that Barry had made a mistake in passing, and they felt that they could get a hit on me. And guess what? They sure did. They sure did. They fulfilled their fantasy, their belief. And you got to find out you got to find that person who cares about you and who knows how to take it to the next level.
But having a good attorney also does not seem to be a bad decision at all.
Or when you get into like negotiating or something, when you're going to do something serious, you should have an attorney, you know, not to like spoil the deal, sure. But because they say sometimes the attorney gets involved and they blow the deal for you, but you know, you need to be protected. That's all. But once you get out there, sometimes you gotta, like they say, sometimes this is the old saying, sometimes you gotta give away a free piece. Right. Okay. Till you get to the point where you can, you know, you have more power, you know. But I would advise an attorney, yeah.
Sure. Last question then, what do you think and what would you attribute your staying power to? Still performing after all these years, still traveling all over. What do you think has been the secret of your success?
God. All I can say is God, because many of my, you know, people that have been my peers over the years, dating back to the 60s, 70s, 80s, some of them are no longer here, and some of them never really, you know, they kind of like fell off the boat. And I've been blessed. And I don't know why. I've been blessed. And I just say, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, God. Because I mean, I'm not like, I'm a Christian. I was raised Christian. You know, my mother was Sunday school, church, and all that. And I did go to church for, you know, out here for a while. And, but I'm not in church every single Sunday. You know, right. But I feel that I've just been blessed.